Hi, Jazz.
Hi, Dan.
Great to see you. And
Great
hello,
to see
First
you.
Church. Good morning. Good to be connected all together once again. Jazz and I are not going to do a traditional sermon, a typical sermon. Obviously, it's going to be more of a conversation. And because we're on Zoom and we haven't done Zoom sermons before, neither of us, we are going to ask you to bear with us. And also to remember that if the internet connection becomes unstable on this call, you may hear some of us dropping out from time to time, but we're going to do the best we can. And we wanted to share a conversation about the text that Jazz just read. Thanks, Jazz. And you'll notice that the text says that when we've done a wrong to each other, we should talk amongst ourselves. And if that doesn't work, we should talk amongst a few witnesses. And if that doesn't work, we should bring it to the whole church. So here we are, church, Jazz and me, ready to bring some confessions to you. It's not any wrongs that we've done to each other. Jazz just started a few weeks ago. We're thrilled she's here. I don't think we've offended her yet, and she certainly hasn't offended us yet. We're just excited to be getting to know each other. But there is a deeper level of struggle that Jazz and I have been talking about lately, and we'd like to share it with you as we turn to the fall, as we kind of come into a new season without the usual markers, with different markers on this Labor Day weekend. We're struggling with how we are holding time itself. Excuse me.
Bless you.
So, Jazz, tell us a little bit. What has time been like for you lately? What has this time been like for you?
Yeah, the time has just been weird, for a lack of a better word. I just started classes this past week, and the doing it on Zoom, it just doesn't feel like what it typically feels like this time to start classes. My sister sent me a picture of my nephew starting kindergarten, seeing him in a shield and a mask, this little guy, and it
Mm,
doesn't feel like it's also starting for him, and also it looks and feels so differently to see him in a shield.
mm,
Um,
wow.
yeah, it's weird, and also I know that there are coming days of colder and shorter nights, and I anticipate these changes. And yeah, feeling almost destabilized
Mhm.
in time. Um,
Wow.
sounds like uh, that might be somewhat similar to you, Dan, or a bit different.
Yeah. I mean, each day is a little bit different, but it's also each day is a lot the same, and that's one of the things I'm
Mm.
wrestling with. I came across a writer named Kelly Barron who did a good job of summing it up. She kind of said how one day just flows into the next. Entire days have changed personalities. Lazy Sundays look like hectic Wednesdays. The glee she usually feels on a Friday afternoon gets tempered by these like quiet nights at home. It's like another quiet night. Like, what is the weekend these days? What is Sunday these days, even? And she says, call this no man's land of calendar time. Call it Blur's Day. We've all heard that joke, maybe. But what day is it today, anyways? Does anybody know? Like, I think, is it Sunday? Is it Thursday? Is it Blur's Day? It's Sunday, right? Definitely, Jazz. It's Sunday
Yes,
today.
definitely
Okay, good.
Sunday.
Just checking.
Uh, and whatever day it is,
There you go.
we are we are starting a new season together. And it may not really feel like it. Next week we'll be having Regathering Sunday, and this weekend's Labor Day weekend, and that's usually like what you said, Dan, with these markers. It's usually a marker for us to start preparing for the fall, and it may not seem like that, and the ways that everything is blending in this COVID time. A few weeks ago, my wife and I ground
Groundhog Day. Nice.
And yeah, and it was one of those experiences that afterwards we were like, this is too real. Like we feel
Mm-hmm.
like we're reliving Groundhog Day every
The
day,
movie.
you know,
Yeah.
every day the same motions, you know, waking up, having coffee, doing my work, going maybe for a walk, but then, you know, having dinner and going to bed, and it's just a repeat cycle. Um, and it feels like that even when we look at the news, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know for me
Mm-hmm.
when I look at my phone, and it just feels like another day of witnessing political, economic, environmental turmoil.
Mm. Wow. So true. Yeah, it's like another storm, another wildfire,
Yes,
like
exactly.
another horrendous act of police violence this week in Rochester, the recording of Mr. Prude. And it's just like again and again and again, it can be soul crushing. And it's like, and that's to say nothing of the daily reality we're facing of leadership that is telling, you know, lies and is denying reality. Like we awaken each day to this same reality on the one hand, and to the same denials of reality. And it's kind of mind-boggling and baffling and definitely destabilizing.
Yeah, so true. And you know, I think that connects into my concern and the confession that I want to bring to you all today, and to you, First Church, of going through these motions, feeling bogged down a day to day, and not necessarily pausing to ask myself, where is God in this? How am I connecting to God? How am I connecting to the sacred, and embracing the sacred in some way, fashion, to prepare for the fall when we anticipate for things to potentially get worse or just be different, or not knowing what it's going to look like.
Yeah. One thing that occurs to me in the midst of our 24-hour news cycle, in the midst of this blurring of our work and home life, and you know, the inability to like know what day it is, it strikes me that we've kind of lost a sense of time. And that's where the confession comes up for me too. I already struggled a bit with keeping Sabbath. I do and have sort of been practicing a Sabbath for many years now, kind of midday Friday to midday Saturday, and I've been okay about that. But Fridays haven't felt like Fridays. Sundays haven't felt like Sundays. And even when we come here, I get to come here every Sunday, and it still feels so much different without us all being gathered together. And it strikes me too that according to the Bible, this blurring of days, there's a sin in that. There is a sin in that, and it is, and it's related to remembering what the Bible says about honoring the Sabbath and keeping it holy. And if every day is the same, how are we finding ways of honoring the Sabbath and keeping it holy?
Yeah,
Jazz, does that resonate at all?
yeah, it definitely does. I think for me, I've been trying to maintain and keep with all these changes. Everything is just feeling different, and it feels harder to find ways to ground myself, and not even just Sabbath, but I imagine all of us having rituals that maybe we had before COVID, or maybe we developed some in response to
Mm-hmm.
COVID and have kept them. Maybe they've gotten lost in this like mundane day to day feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it feels hard,
Yeah.
honestly.
In thinking about the Sabbath again, especially on this Labor Day weekend, I'm reminding of something that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said. And it seems particularly apt now since we can't gather in our gorgeous sanctuary. And since so many other gathering spaces are off limits, and in many ways we're alone in these bubbles. Heschel calls the Sabbath a cathedral in time. If we want to commune with God, we must enter into God's dwelling in time. Wow. And into a sanctuary or a place or a palace or a cathedral in time. It's a beautiful expression. It requires some imagination, and Heschel just reminds us that Sabbath or Sabbath time is time set aside to become attuned to holiness in time, to sanctify our time, which is always a gift from God. And when we find ourselves living in these sort of days that are blurring together, my concern is that we're not stopping to sanctify time itself. And that's a problem. That's something that maybe we can all confess to each other in these pandemic times. How are we able to find holiness in time? How are we able to practice Sabbath and have what Heschel calls an intuition of eternity? That's what Sabbath is for Heschel. It's like it's a taste of heaven, even to enter into this cathedral of time, of intentionality, of presence. So I wonder if there's any way that we can try to reclaim that and try to commit ourselves to practicing Sabbath, whether weekly or finding some mini Sabbaths during the week. Jazz, I wonder if this, what is your experience of Sabbath been like? Mine has been far from perfect, especially these days. And yet there's an invitation here that I find really compelling.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I think maybe others will feel similarly. I think I tend to think of Sabbath as like this day or 2 days that I take off and try to disconnect from the emails or chores or whatever it may be. And I wonder if Heschel really helps us think about Sabbath when we think about time and entering into this eternity, entering into this feeling of heaven. I wonder if it's also helpful to think about, like what you were saying, moments of time in between moments. If there's a way that we can incorporate some practices or rituals that feel like they're more authentic, that connect to our lives and the reality of what we live in. Like I can imagine before going to bed at night, just having a moment of sighing, just and releasing stress and just giving it to God in that moment, and resting in that moment, in that time, in God's arms, imagining closing our eyes before we eat our meal just for a second or two, practicing a moment of gratitude. I think there are so many ways that we can think about this, and it feels really important to, and it feels more obtainable for me to think about Sabbath too in that way, of those in between moments.
That's beautiful. And thinking about the way that our work and our home life blend so much now, and remembering that this is Labor Day weekend, I recall a couple of DC labor lawyer friends of mine who have a bumper sticker on their car that says "The Labor Movement, the ones who brought you the weekend." And I always love that reminder, because we do have the labor movement to thank for the 5-day work week, even though that seems like so long ago that many of us, understood what a 5-day work day week is. But but I think it's not only the labor movement that we have to thank for that. And by the way, today we of course want to honor all of those who are laboring 7 days a week, 6, 5, however many, as essential workers, as healthcare workers. We could not get through this pandemic without all of you and without all of them. But it's not just the labor movement or labor that we need to thank. It's this profound spiritual tradition, and we need to thank our spiritual ancestors for and God for giving us this beautiful experience of Sabbath. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, 6 days out in the world, 1 day in a cathedral in time. I'll say, in terms of more of my own daily life, many of you know that Nancy and I have experienced a huge transition. We sent Nellie off to college on a Friday, and so we've only had a few days into this new reality, but the pattern of our days that for so many years have been oriented around when the kids are with us, when they're with their dad, what time is dinner, and when do we need to pick them up, and all of that. We're entering into a whole new experience of time together. And I was reminded by a dear colleague who's about 15 years older and who older and wiser, who recalled that when he hit that empty nest, it was a time when he began a practice with his partner of setting aside time each day at about 5 o'clock, give or take an hour, where he would check in with his partner and have a time. Sometimes they share a drink, sometimes they don't, sometimes they play cards, sometimes they don't, sometimes they share deeply of their lives or about their days, and sometimes they just sit quietly. But he said that that has been an enormous gift to their relationship, and I can imagine that being a ritual, a sort of maybe a chapel in time, a daily chapel in time that I'm like eager to experience. And I wonder, what's coming to mind for you, First Church, in terms of ways of carving out some sense of holiness in time in your days. Jazz gave us some beautiful examples of rituals. What comes to mind for you? Like, post them in the chat. Let's share them with one another. And if you'd like to talk more about what would work for you, we're available. We'd love to jump on a call and brainstorm and hear and share more confessions about how we haven't figured this out yet. But it feels like coming into this fall, especially, it's important that we can begin to make set some intentions and commit to regular Sabbath keeping, maybe even commit to, next Sunday, Regathering Sunday, commit to just tuning in to our services. We know it's online. We know it's not ideal. We know we'd rather be together, but imagine that as a way of entering into a cathedral of time, even if you're closing your eyes for part of it. So, Jazz, take us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would like to invite us all on a practice that I've witnessed with a pastor and their congregation. And so I invite us in this moment to place our hand on our chest or on our pulse, on our wrist, on focusing on our breath and remembering that we are